Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeanne Shaheen. I am the top Democrat on the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee. We are waiting for Senator Klobuchar, who is the top Democrat on the Agriculture Committee, which is the authorizing committee. I get to do the money. She gets to do the policy. And hopefully we work together. But I just wanted to let you all know that we're going to wait a few minutes while she gets here, and then we will begin. Thank you. Is she on her way? Yes. Okay, since I'm going first, I'm going to go ahead and begin because Senator Klobuchar is due to arrive momentarily. Let me first thank all of you very much for being here today, and especially thank all of our panelists who some have come from very far away to join us, so we really appreciate that. I have an opening statement, then Senator Klobuchar will give an opening statement, and we will ask questions, and we think we will be joined by the senators whose names you see: Senator Heinrich from New Mexico, Senator Kaine from Virginia, Senator Welch from Vermont, and Senator Booker from New Jersey. We may be joined by some others along the way, whoever this is, I can't see. Oh, and Senator Durbin, of course, from Illinois. So as people come in, we will let them ask questions, and we will hear from each of our witnesses who will make opening statements as well. So I will begin. While the architect of the DOGE attack on the United States Agency for International Development, Elon Musk, may no longer be part of the Trump administration, the consequences of his actions will be felt by Americans and people around the world for decades to come. That includes serious impacts on American farmers, ranchers, and agricultural businesses, as well as the safety of our domestic crops and livestock. That's why Senator Klobuchar, the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, and I have convened today's discussion. Since President Eisenhower signed the Food for Peace program into law in 1954, American farmers have sold their commodities to the program: sorghum, corn, beans, rice, and vegetable oil. The U.S. Department of Agriculture facilitates those purchases and partners with NGOs, including the United Nations World Food Program. That's done to feed the hungry in some of the most vulnerable regions of the world. But of course, that has changed because of decisions that have been made by the Trump administration. According to a recent Reuters report, food rations that could supply 3.5 million people for a month are rotting in warehouses around the world because of USAID cuts. Again, food rations that could supply 3.5 million people are rotting because of these cuts. Let's welcome Senator Klobuchar, Senator Booker. I have started with my opening statement and explained how things would go.
Excellent.
So, sadly, people are going hungry while American farmers are losing a critical buyer for their crops. The DOGE cuts are also affecting innovation labs at universities across the country, including the Food Safety Program at Purdue University in Indiana, the Livestock Systems Program at the University of Florida, the Current and Emerging Threats to Crops program at Penn State, and we're delighted to have David Hughes, who's part of that program, here with us, and peanut production, a program addressing malnutrition at the University of Georgia. The seeds, crops, and fertilizers developed by these labs fuel American leadership both in overseas markets and here at home. Shutting them down doesn't just hurt Americans today, it also blocks the breakthroughs we need for tomorrow. And cuts to foreign aid are weakening animal and crop disease monitoring, which USAID has long carried out in partnership with USDA. We held a roundtable earlier this year, and one statistic really stood out for me. That was that 75% of the pandemic risks come from animal to human transfer of disease. So 75%. And we're not engaging in surveillance of those anymore. Preventing that jump from animals to humans starts with disease surveillance programs. Beyond preventing the next pandemic, these programs are vital to the safety of American exports. Consumers in Japan or South Korea won't buy American products if they think there's a high risk of disease. Now the administration has said these cuts are about protecting taxpayers. But these cuts put Americans at risk, and they undermine global markets for U.S. businesses. And what we're seeing is that the only real winner here is China, whose agribusiness investments now exceed those of the United States, Brazil, and India combined. So, Mr. President, agribusiness investments by China now exceed the United States, Brazil, and India combined. So what you're doing with these cuts does nothing to help American farmers. I hope today's discussion will highlight the real challenges that these cuts pose to American farmers and businesses and help us better understand the opportunities they may hand to our global competitors like China. Before I turn it over to Senator Klobuchar, let me just introduce our panelists briefly. David Hughes is the director of the USAID Innovation Lab on current and emerging threats to crops at Penn State University. Kevin Shea is the former director of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service at USDA. Sarah Charles is the former assistant administrator of USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. And Thoric Cedarstrom is the international food aid representative from the U.S. Dry Bean Council. Thank you all so much for being here. Senator Klobuchar.
There we go. Is that better? Senator Shaheen and I thought it would be a good idea to combine forces here to have this spotlight focus on the intersection between what happens on our farmlands and what happens with the rest of the world. And that is that these cuts are clearly problematic for our standing in the world, our leadership in the world, our security, our trade relationships, because so many of these countries, when we help them maybe 50 years ago, it then leads to stronger nations that do trade with us, but it also socks us right here at home. This foreign purchases from programs like Cindy McCain's, I just met with her for the World Food Program, and others, amount to $2 billion in American goods every year. $2 billion in American goods. So now think if you're a farmer out there in Minnesota, you've got a small farm, you grow soybeans. You are hit right now by so many headwinds that you are about to come roadkill for this administration's policies. The first is the tariffs. Your markets are drying up. The second, depending on what kind of farmer you are, if you maybe are poultry or you do something that needs help with the research that Jeanne was just referring to when it comes to animal diseases, not only does this funding help to catch horrific diseases that could come over to our country that are developed overseas, we also have animal diseases that kill animals, like we've seen with avian flu. So all of this is going on at once, and then at the same time you've got USDA programs cut off, kind of unexpectedly funds frozen, you can't call a loan officer, and this is what's happening to our farmers right now. For decades, there was broad bipartisan agreement that foreign food aid helps not just hungry people, but also the U.S., because it builds global ag markets and promotes global security. The Trump administration has decimated Food for Peace and more recently Food for Progress and the McGovern-Dole program. We are taking the lead today in questioning the USDA about recent cancellations of food aid contract, and we urge our colleagues to join us in this effort. This adds to the broader set of challenges that I just mentioned, and I would add one more. The SNAP funding cuts, the food assistance cuts, which are going to kick about 4 million people off of food assistance and reduce the amount of money they have when it comes to paying for groceries, is going to be a further hit for our farmers. And I just want to end by saying foreign assistance isn't just about goodwill. It's a frontline defense. Foreign assistance that goes to USAID and the United Nations Food and Ag organizations help support programs that train local veterinarians, build lab capacity, and stop pathogens and pests at the source before they reach our shores. When we cut off foreign assistance, we lose our eyes and ears on the ground. We blind ourselves to early warning signs of foreign animal diseases and invasive pests, including African swine fever or exotic fruit flies, which could devastate our livestock and specialty crop industry. Slashing foreign assistance is short-sighted, cutting our commodity markets, hurting our farmers who are already under siege, weakening our biosecurity, and putting American farmers and ranchers' livelihoods at risk. Thank you, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Now we'll hear from our panelists, and we'll begin with you, Dr. Hughes.
Great. Thank you so much indeed for the invitation to come here, Senator Shaheen and Senator Klobuchar. It is really a great honour as an Irish immigrant to address the senators. But it was even greater honour to be able to run a USAID Innovation Lab, the Current Emerging Threats to Crops Innovation Lab at Penn State. And I want to argue why we should keep such innovation labs and overseas research, because they do indeed make America safer, stronger and more prosperous. So let's start with safety. So George Washington in 1778 established the first army training camp in the Hudson Valley, which then became West Point. But we no longer train our army in the Hudson Valley. We train them across the world because threats are across the world. And this is what APHIS, as you'll hear from Kevin and ourselves in the innovation labs do. We deploy scientists globally in order to protect our crops. And this should be obvious to Secretary Rubio, coming as he does from the great state of Florida, where 75% of the iconic citrus industry was devastated by an invasive disease. You mentioned Mediterranean fruit fly. In that case, it was citrus greening. 30,000 jobs lost, over $3.5 billion in lost funding. So by working abroad, we protect American crops and we make them safer. How then do the innovation labs make us stronger? To that, we looked to another founding father, Thomas Jefferson. During the time he was an ambassador to France, he traveled around collecting crops and plants. He traveled across the Alps on a mule and literally stole or smuggled out upland rice from the Lombardy Plain, sewed it into the jacket of his coat, and brought it back to Monticello, where he grew it. During the Organic Act of 1862, along with the Morrill Act, we institutionalized a way in which we would travel around the world collecting crops. We collected over 200,000 of them. And that continues to this very day through the innovation labs like the Legume System at Michigan State. We enable bean farmers, as we'll hear about later on, to be more protected. So we make American farmers safer and stronger. What about more prosperous? Elon Musk may have taken USAID to the wood chipper, but what is inevitable about the AI part will not be stopped. The AI part will increase, and American farmers will increasingly rely upon it. We at Penn State have been developing an AI system called Plant Village, not only for international farmers, but also for domestic farmers. And I think the collected congresspeople and also those looking online should be really worried about the future of knowledge dissemination. The United States does a particularly good job through the land-grant systems of enabling transparent, accessible science, which is evidence-based and updates. I know we have a farmer here in the room who would attest to that. So we want to make sure that if you do have an AI system giving knowledge to American farmers, you better be sure that it's not a made-in-China AI system. And that should concern us all going forward. So in closing, we should definitely protect the innovation labs. We have the opportunity to do that. In fact, we should expand this overseas research and development, because not only does it help the world be more prosperous, it certainly serves the American farmers on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the honor to be here today. American agriculture is most productive in the world. It's mostly because the farmers and the ranchers and the farm workers are so good. But another indispensable factor is the health of our plants and animals. We're free of most of the pests and diseases that plague most of the world. It's indispensable for our farmers and ranchers to have food for programs in America and around the world. And I'm concerned that some of the things that have happened here in the last 4 months are putting us at risk, putting farmers and ranchers at risk, which means putting the food supply at risk. The reductions in the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, 15 to 20% of experienced people with expertise have either been fired or fomented strongly to leave the agency. And that is of grave concern to me. And there couldn't be a worse time to lower our guard. You mentioned African swine fever in the Dominican Republic, very close to our shores, very easy, one trip away from getting here. That's just one example. Foot and mouth disease, eradicated a century ago in America, now appearing all around the world for the first time in many, many years. Another big concern for us. And screwworm has breached the barrier we had in Panama for many years, has made it into Mexico, another major concern for us. And it's not just animal agriculture, it's also plant agriculture, commodities, especially crops. There's so many different insects and pests that threaten those. You mentioned spotted lantern, or not, you mentioned citrus green disease, which has wiped out production there. If we don't have a fully functional partnership, federal, state, and industry dealing with plant health, then California and Texas may lose their orange production and grapefruit production as well. Many parts of USDA play a role in protecting agriculture, but as the name implies, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service has the key role when it comes to health. And over 1,300 employees, which is about 15% of the full-time permanent workforce, has left just in the last few months. And the President's FY26 budget calls for even more cuts. APHIS cannot do its job with that level of personnel. It simply cannot do it. And it's not just numbers. I suppose that this administration could say they're going to hire 1,300 new people. But the loss of expertise, and not just the expertise, but the trust and relationships built up between the federal government and the states and the industries and foreign countries is lost as well. So all those things are a grave concern to me going forward. I served in USDA for 45 years, 43 years of those with APHIS, 12 years as the administrator. And I've never been so concerned about the ability of the agency to carry out its mission going forward. And I totaled the numbers up. Half of my time were under Republican administrations, half under Democratic administrations. So this is not a long-time partisan issue to me. This is something completely new that we have never seen before. I'll conclude by saying the other folks on the panel today can talk about the impact of eliminating certain food programs around the world and what that will mean to hungry and poor people around the world and our standing around the world. My purpose is to say that those programs, and indeed everything else for American farmers and ranchers, depends on the health of the agriculture industry and the ability of farmers and ranchers to be free of pests and diseases. And a fully functional APHIS and USDA and all of its state counterparts is indispensable for that to happen. And the only way that can work is if APHIS has an experienced, qualified workforce of experts with trusted relationships and free of partisan political-based oversight, as has been threatened for many of the leadership. So I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charles.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Welsh, and Senator Booker. For 3.5 years, I led USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, overseeing the Title II Food for Peace programs. For the last year, I've been a stay-at-home mom. And I can tell you there are few things that are more gutting as a mother than sitting next to another terrified mother, holding her emaciated child, lethargic, arm no wider than a marker, belly swollen from edema, eyes sunken and glassy. But there are also few things that are more life-affirming than seeing that same child just a few weeks later transformed by treatment. Eyes bright, giggling, miraculously back among the living. For over 70 years, American food assistance has represented the best of our values, a literal lifesaver from American farmers to the world's most vulnerable. Today, that legacy is threatened by this administration's chaos and cruelty. Despite promises to preserve life-saving assistance, of the nearly $5 billion appropriated by Congress for various emergency food and nutrition assistance, only 20% has been allocated, and the consequences are playing out in real time. In Haiti, 8,400 households have already slipped into famine conditions, and 2.4 million are on the precipice. Rations have been cut in half, and emergency assistance for 500,000 people will likely run out altogether in August, during peak hurricane season. In Somalia, terminated grants have shuttered emergency nutrition centers. Over a quarter of Save the Children supported facilities have stopped services just this month, putting 55,000 children at immediate risk of death. In Sudan, famine is confirmed in 10 areas, the first famine declaration since 2017, and ration cuts push more towards starvation. Globally, 1 million kids in 17 countries are losing a daily meal, often their only meal, as McGovern-Dole school feeding programs are slashed. The impacts are felt here at home as well. As Senator Klobuchar said, USAID procured nearly $2 billion from American producers and shippers, 1.1 million metric tons of American-grown food from 19 states, corn from Iowa, rice from Louisiana, wheat from Washington. Despite Congress appropriating Title II in March, the administration has issued just one tender for ready-to-use therapeutic food, barely 10% of normal volume. The Georgia and Rhode Island-based suppliers of RUTF report that with no upcoming demand, they will have to shutter after this minimal order, laying off hundreds of staff. At the same time, UNICEF warns that funding cuts and lack of RUTF could force 2.4 million children suffering from severe malnutrition to go without therapeutic food for the rest of the year. As a reminder, this American-made product has a cure rate exceeding 90%. Less than $1 a day in RUTF can bring a starving child back from death's door in a matter of weeks. The administration is just sitting on the funding that could keep these children alive. You've already appropriated it. Beyond the immediate cuts, the administration's chaotic and cruel approach has created devastating uncertainty. Programs have been terminated, reactivated, and terminated again. Some partners are still not getting paid. The administration has assured you that life-saving programs will continue, but has zeroed them out in the budget request. Critical staff have been riffed, and others are currently in a Hunger Games-style competition for a handful of slots at the State Department, where little thought has been given to how programs will actually be administered and overseen. There has been zero planning for fiscal year 2026. In a crisis entirely of the administration's own making, the chaos of the last 4 months means that American farmers don't have the plans for what they can plant. Businesses are shuttering, and the world's most vulnerable children are paying the ultimate cost. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. Mr. Cedarstrom.
Esteemed senators, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today and share a perspective from the farming community in the United States, which strongly endorses and supports U.S. international food assistance. For the last 5 years, I've had the privilege to represent the U.S. Dry Bean Council on international food aid issues. And most recently, I've been tasked with developing commercial markets in sub-Saharan Africa as well, where we have been seeking innovative ways to leverage food aid into food trade, which is a whole new area which I think deserves a lot of attention. But if I might share the perspective of the U.S. Dry Bean Council, which I think also reflects the larger commodity groups that are present here in this event. And there's basically 4 points that we see of value to the United States. Number one is that foreign assistance extends the reach of the American harvest, supporting economic resilience at home. U.S. food assistance programs create a reliable, values-driven outlet for American agricultural commodities, particularly dry beans, wheat, corn, dairy, other commodities, and stabilizing demand and prices for farmers across the heartland. These programs help offset the risk of unpredictable market, trade disruptions, and climate variability. By purchasing food domestically for humanitarian use abroad, U.S. foreign assistance strengthens the agricultural economy in rural America while reducing the burden of American taxpayers over the long term through conflict prevention and economic stabilization overseas. Point number 2, feeding the hungry abroad upholds the moral compass of rural America. American farmers are not just stewards of the land, they are stewards of compassion. Generations of farm families have lived by the principle that abundance carries responsibility. U.S. food aid allows our farmers to live out those values by answering the call to feed the hungry. Whether it's children in drought-stricken East Africa or families displaced by conflict, the crops grown in the fields in Nebraska and Iowa become a lifeline. This deeply aligns with the faith-based, community-oriented ethos of rural America, where helping one's neighbor, no matter how far away, is a sacred duty. Point number 3, foreign assistance builds global stability, which safeguards the future of American agriculture. When U.S. foreign aid supports food security and economic development abroad, it reduces the drivers of conflict, migration, global instability, conditions that otherwise require costly military or humanitarian interventions. A more stable world means safer global trade, growing markets for U.S. agricultural products, and less volatility in global grain and bean markets. American farmers recognize that peace abroad protects prosperity at home. Final point, U.S. farmers are global ambassadors of goodwill, living out a legacy of leadership. American farmers have long stood at the forefront of global efforts to end hunger, not only as producers, but as partners in peace and development. Through U.S. food assistance programs, farmers extend more than just surplus. They extend American values, generosity, responsibility, and leadership. These programs allow farm communities to teach their children that what they grow matters, not just for their neighbors, but for the world. It reinforces pride, purpose, and the enduring role of American agriculture in building a better, more humane future. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. We will now get to the discussion phase of the roundtable and welcome Senator Kaine. We are going to go in order of arrival, beginning with Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I'll start with you, Mr. Cedarstrom, from an ag standpoint. What function does food aid play in supporting domestic markets for farmers, and what will happen when this $2 billion a year disappears?
Yes. Yeah, I'm good. Yes, no, very good question. As we've seen by the numbers, sorry. The amount of food aid that is purchased domestically is a significant market share, right? Especially for crops such as dry beans, which is a specialty crop, right? And so having a reliable market that flows through food aid is a significant benefit to the members of the U.S. Dry Bean Council. And I dare say for the other commodity groups as well, right? To be able to count on that institutional market that comes from food assistance is a significant benefit to the U.S. American farmer. There's no question in my mind.
And if we withdraw from this market, do you see other countries stepping in and taking our place as we lose influence?
In terms of food aid as a donor?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anyone on the horizon that stands ready to fill that void and that have the similar values that I spoke to. I do not see that.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Shea, as former administrator of APHIS within USDA, you know the importance of protecting U.S. livestock and poultry. Could you talk about the effect of the cuts on foreign assistance when it comes to animal disease prevention and research?
We're free of pests and diseases. We want to keep them out of this country. So the more we can help other countries knock them down, the better off we are. And there are so many diseases and pests around the world, we can't just sit back and wait for them to get here and deal with them. So I think it's crucial that programs like we were talking about today remain in place, because we are helping other countries deal with these pests and diseases and giving them the tools to do it, the knowledge to do it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Dr. Hughes, at Penn State, you directed the work of the USAID Innovation Lab on current and emerging threats to crops. Could you talk about how that benefits our farmers and why the research is important to places like Minnesota and Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's vitally important because of these unknown unknowns. Evolution is constantly proceeding and throwing new threats at us. And because of globalization, as we have more increasing trade, we see more diseases coming into these countries. We ourselves in Pennsylvania have recently gone through the spotted lanternfly. I've mentioned the case in Florida with the citrus greening, but there's always going to be more threats coming down the line. And so we necessarily have to have that protective mechanism in place. So, for example, one of our team members is studying thrips, which are a small insect that might affect the floral industry here in the United States. We had the ability to study that in Nepal where we were working. And in those cases, we have a safe space in order to develop mechanisms to protect against that so we can quickly deploy them when those pests come in. So fundamentally, we don't know what the next threat is going to be. The only thing we do know after farming here for a couple of hundred years is we will have threats. And as an Irishman, I don't have to overstate the importance of threats to food security.
Exactly. Well, I will say just one thing for people who aren't in the ag world. When they refer to specialty crops, that includes potatoes. It includes really everything that we eat. And it is an emerging area for the U.S., but we know that these types of crops are especially susceptible to these pests, and what we're seeing in a changing climate and the like, we're seeing more and more of this. So it's even more devastating. So, and thank you, Ms. Charles. I'm going to let Senator Shaheen take over for your moving testimony.
Thank you. I'm actually going to call on Senator Booker next.
There we go. There we go. I'm so grateful. And Senator Klobuchar, thank you for saying that about specialty crops. It's a frustration of mine in general that we spend so much of our subsidies, 93%, on crops that are not actually go into the highly processed foods that make us sick, and only about 7% of our subsidies go to those specialty crops. This is an extraordinary opportunity for us to connect the kind of healthy foods that help empower Americans as well as others. This hearing is so vital, so important. The connection of our two rankers on these critical committees and understanding that how interwoven our foreign policy is with our food policy here in the United States. Frankly, for our farmers and how valuable it is for them, and the pride that our farmers take in understanding that they're not only feeding America, but they're feeding the world and meeting some of the greatest moral crises there are. There is a callous and unnecessary slashing of these programs that's going on by the Trump administration that is a violation of our collective values, causing extraordinary pain to hungry people in other countries, and hurting farmers here at home. And when I say pain, I mean, let's be specific. People are dying. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people are dying because of the cruel, callous policies of this administration, unnecessarily hurting our farmers here at home as well, and creating destabilization in the world that does have an effect on America. The Trump administration's termination of food security, nutrition, and agricultural resilience programs has made this problem globally of global hunger so much worse. It's estimated that the administration's foreign assistance cuts have already resulted, as I said, in thousands of children dying, but specifically 63,000 children dying unnecessarily from hunger. This is not just heartbreaking, it is a moral obscenity. In Sudan, where the conflict has caused the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, a child dies from hunger every 2 hours. Community food kitchens are running on empty, and in Sudan, people will die of preventable diseases as a result of the Trump administration's food aid cuts. If this is, to me, unacceptable. and thousands of farmers in the United States who rely on commodity purchases from federal agencies, this is food that helps them make ends meet. And so I want to just first and foremost, I want to thank Mr. Cederstrom for being here. Really a voice that I and my staff rely on. And I'm hearing a lot of farmers in New Jersey who are really struggling right now. Can you talk about the importance of the USDA and the USAID commodity purchase program to the farmers who grow beans and to all the businesses that are part of the U.S. Dry Bean Council, and to the impact of these programs being canceled?
Sure, most happy to. There's no doubt, that the international feeding programs that the United States has championed for over 60 years, right, have had a tremendous positive impact, and my colleague can speak to it much better in terms of the actual numbers and achievement. But the U.S. agricultural community is proud to be a supply partner in that, providing top quality U.S. agricultural commodities to international food aid efforts. And that's a noble endeavor that the agricultural community happily embraces. And it is a moral imperative, too, that the agricultural community supports. At the same time, there is enlightened self-interest. Our constituencies are businesses, the farms in New Jersey and across America. They have to make a profit or they cannot stay in business, right? And so food aid programs have come to constitute a significant market that U.S. farmers can respond to happily and respond to tenders and generate income that keep their businesses active and profitable. And so the continuation of an expansion and perhaps even reconfiguration of U.S. international food aid programs is something that the agricultural community firmly supports, right? Yes, go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you
Yeah.
for that. I want to be mindful of my colleagues. I just want to ask one final question, Ms. Charles. I just gave that number, 63,000 children estimated to have died because of our cancellations of these programs. One of the places where we're seeing the greatest amount of suffering and death happening as a result of USAID's efforts being pulled is in Sudan. Food security programs I'm being told by Secretary Rubio that those programs are still getting funding, but that's just not what I'm hearing on the ground. What are you hearing, and how is food security connected not only to preserving life there, but really stability and the hard security that every community deserves?
So as you mentioned, Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now. 1.7 million people are currently in famine conditions in Sudan. This is the first declared famine we've had in the world anywhere since 2017. But it's not the first famine threat we've had since 2017. I remember working with many of you on this committee in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine to do a robust response to famine threats in the Horn of Africa, where we were able to avert famine in Somalia, in northern Kenya, in South Sudan. During Trump's first administration, he worked with many of you in this committee, along with David Beasley, who was leading the World Food Program at the time, on the 4 famines response, where, again, U.S. leadership worked to avert famine. The difference between 70 years ago, when these programs were first introduced, and today is we've actually developed the tools to monitor, to respond early in a way that can prevent and avert the worst outcomes, death of tens of thousands, if not more, children. And the heartbreak of this moment is that those tools are sitting on the sideline right now. They've been funded. We have still, to this day, there are still staff, although many of them are facing their last week at work this week. But that expertise is still there, but it is on the sidelines while we're facing, again, one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of the last 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have a timer system, and we only have this room until noon. So I'm watching the clock very carefully for all of our senators who are asking questions, and we will go to Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. Just listening, you represent an ecosystem. You know, you do research that makes food safe or anticipates and predicts problems. You've been USDA. We love that in Vermont. You're delivering, and Mr. Cedarholm, you're part of the distribution. And what strikes me is that there's a fair amount of humility in folks who work in an organization through Republican and Democratic administrations where you have this expertise because you understand that you have to have institutions and structures to be able to sustain a food delivery system, everything from how farmers grow to averting pests to coming up with delivery mechanisms to get food to people who need it. So one of the things that's so disturbing to me about what is happening and the way it's happening is that we're destroying the capacity at every step along the way. And it's not as though you can flip a switch and those people who have expertise suddenly are going to come back. So thank you actually for making that very, very clear. The second thing I want to say is farmers love, the Vermont farmers, all farmers, they love to feed people. And what you said is so true. And now I want to go with my quick question to you, Ms. Charles. It's my understanding we actually have food that is available for distribution, but it's sitting in warehouses because of the cuts that have been made so the people who can take the food from the warehouse outside of the doors of the warehouse and put it on a table for hungry children to eat, we're not there. Is that true?
It is certainly my understanding that the career staff that are left at USAID have been working furiously around the clock, even knowing that they've been fired, to find ways to get that food into the hands of partners that can use that food.
So the food is there.
The food is there.
The need is there.
And
we can't deliver it.
And it has been bureaucratic process after bureaucratic
and that's
process
official
after
governmental
bureaucratic
policy.
process.
Pretty shocking. Thank you.
Senator Kane.
Two questions or lines of inquiry. First, as the U.S. is cutting these programs, others fill the vacuum. So talk to us about particularly what People's Republic of China is doing as they watch the U.S. reduce these critical programs.
I can speak about that from their perspective of pure and applied science. They're certainly eclipsing us. We ourselves, so we have a private sector company we spun out to take a technology which began at Virginia Tech. We're now using that as a technology to help farmers grow more food in Kenya. We are looking to China as a supply source for what are called pheromones to act as a bait. They're just far superior. A lot of European and American scientists are decamping to China for that reason. Oftentimes we come here to your country, and I am a citizen, we come here because of the research excellence. So China will absolutely fill that space, both in applied research, and it certainly will fill the space, as I mentioned before you came in terms of AI. So USAID may be dead, but the AI is inevitable. And you certainly don't want to have farmers from California to China, Montana to Mozambique, Indiana to India using a made-in-China AI system.
Others? Sarah.
Certainly, we've seen for some time now China trying to play in this space, but they don't do it in the way that we do it. I think most recently we saw in the earthquake response in Myanmar, one of the largest earthquakes, catastrophic earthquakes that we've seen in some time, very limited U.S. government response because the capacity had been taken offline by the Trump administration. China showed up in a big way with urban search and rescue and with assistance, but they do it all through the government. So the networks that the U.S. government had with non-governmental partners, with civil society organizations that work across conflict lines and are focused on reaching need where it is, those were abandoned in favor of assistance through, including very repressive and autocratic regimes. So we can expect China to show up. We can expect China to show up in a visible way, but they're not driven by need. They're not driven by humanity. They're driven by a PR exercise and an exercise in supporting, again, often very repressive regimes.
Well, let me make a comment, then move to a second issue, which is the administration. I'm on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee too, and the administration witnesses always talk about China as the pacing threat. This is the adversary that we need to prepare to match in every domain. And yet again and again and again, we get announcements out of the administration that I think are celebrated in Beijing. So yesterday, the administration announced that it was going to review the AUKUS framework with the UK and Australia. Beijing hated that when it was announced under the Biden administration. They are no doubt celebrating with some notion that the Trump administration at least wants to review and possibly pull back from that commitment. Similarly, these cuts in USAID, generally food aid in particular, are things that are being celebrated by the nation that the administration claims is the adversary that we have to pay attention to. Second thing I just sort of want to bring up is the House may be voting today on a rescissions package, $9.4 billion of money appropriated in an appropriations bill agreed upon by all parties, including the White House. The administration has sent a package up to pull back $9.3 billion, and that is State Department, USAID, and U.S. Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Within the USAID and State Department side, I think there are a number of line items that touch upon food aid. Those rescissions cannot go into effect unless Congress, both houses, ratifies the rescission package by a simple majority vote within 45 days. That would be July the 18th. My belief is the House may be voting on this package today, and I expect it will pass there. But when it comes to the Senate, just to kind of let you know what I hope we're going to do, this is a budget bill that's subject to the same vote-a-rama process that other budget bills are. So we can go line item by line item to make our Republican colleagues own every last cut. Do you really want to cut PEPFAR? Do you really want to cut food aid? Do you really want to cut X, Y, and Z? And it takes an affirmative vote of a majority to pass the bill. Hopefully we can beat the whole rescissions bill, because appropriators like my colleague, Senator Shaheen. Amy, are you an appropriator? Amy's not. But the appropriators work awful hard to do a deal, and then they shake hands, Democrats, Republicans, House, Senate, White House, to let the White House just claw the money back. We hope we'll get Republican support for no rescissions. This was a deal. We ought to live by the deal. But if they suddenly cave, we are at least going to hopefully make them go on the record. Do you embrace or do you disown rescinding important programs like food aid? And it's my hope that we're going to make them not just express concerns, but actually vote on all of these items. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good metaphor, as we're having a food aid hearing. So anyway, stay tuned. But that means that many of you in the advocacy community, you're going to have an opportunity when you see that bill up for a vote on the floor. You will know that we are going to be forcing votes on these important matters, and anything you can do to outreach our Republican colleagues, express the importance of these programs, urge Congress not to rescind these particular line items would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Kane. And just to follow up a little bit, Ms. Charles, you mentioned Myanmar. What was particularly devastating about that from our perspective is that we had 3 people on the ground in Myanmar to assess the damage. And while they were there sleeping on the ground because they had no other place to stay, they were fired. And China moved right in. Now, the PRC outpaces the United States in investments in global agriculture systems in sub-Saharan Africa and the Indo-Pacific. And I just wonder, to follow up on that, how does the PRC's growing investment in global agricultural systems affect U.S. farmers' competitiveness and their access to markets? And I will throw that open for whoever would like to respond. Yes,
happy to
Dr.
take a stab at that. We are not multiple countries, but rather one large garden in which we grow crops in different places, whether it's in China, Africa, or the Midwest, corn, for example. And the diseases simply move on that. And as a younger approach, a younger country in terms of its educational establishments, China is just so much more connected to its historical legacy of farming. When Lincoln started the land grants in 1862, 60% of us were farmers. Now it's less than 2% of us. Unfortunately, we have a lot of other people in decision-making powers. 51% of the Senate are lawyers. Less than 0.4% are in the American public are lawyers. And so we just have this decision-making process. They're just better at making decisions about farming because they're closer to it. I really appreciate everybody speaking on behalf of farmers, but sometimes we roll them out as a touchy, good feel story. It's not like that. Our threats are threatened. Our crops are threatened, and they will be increasingly so. And so we absolutely need to have that rebalancing. And I think we sort of drifted too far away from what the land grants are. Senator Welch mentioned humility. As an immigrant, I find America to be number one in everything except humility. And I think And I think it's the land grants which are our story to be sold, and we actually have Borlaug and the Rotunda over there as an exemplar of that. So we need to re-embrace the history, supremacy, and potential future of the land grant universities for the American public.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that, Mr. Cedarstrom?
Yeah, I just wanted to say and echo I'm out of land grant university. I did my PhD University of Arizona. Firm support of it, and I have worked in international agriculture all my career, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. And when I when I would go in to meet with the Minister of Agriculture or some of the technical people, invariably, a great number of them had studied in the United States, right? Gotten their degrees in the United States and had fond memories of their time in the United States, not just their study programs that positioned them well in their careers, but with friends and family in the United States. And that is rapidly disappearing, right? You are losing that cohort of international scholars and technocrats that had come to the United States through different U.S. government programs, right, that paid for their studies. And the value of that is tremendous. Be able to go in and talk irrigation with someone that had graduated from one of the either Utah State or University of Arizona, and it's instant trust. That currency of trust is rapidly disappearing, right? And so we're at a competitive disadvantage now in these highly contested markets, right? It is challenging under the best of circumstances, but when we dismantle those good relationships, right, that have been built over decades, they're hard to replace, right? Thank you.
They are, and thank you for bringing that up. It's really devastating to think about the impact of our unwillingness not just to support foreign students in the United States who come to our universities and colleges, but to support American students going abroad who learn so much about the rest of the world and bring that knowledge back to the United States as well. Ms. Charles, I think I've got time for one more question. The administration plans to move USAID's humanitarian assistance infrastructure to the State Department. They've proposed a funding cut of 75% for that humanitarian assistance. What impact do we think this is going to have on our ability to respond to crises around the world?
Not only has the administration proposed a 75% cut, moving the functions to the State Department, but USAID used to have 10,000 staff. They're talking about 200 billets. Of those, just dozens focused on humanitarian assistance. Even with the cuts, billions of dollars of humanitarian assistance spread between 6 or 7 different bureaus. There is no architecture that's been proposed at the State Department that would allow for the kind of robust emergency response that the U.S. has come to, the American population has come to expect from its government, and certainly that's required in the world right now.
I remember being in Pakistan in 2009 after the earthquakes and flooding, and the one thing we heard everywhere we went was what a difference America had made in the response to that tragedy, and how much they appreciated our assistance, and that will be gone.
Can I add just to that? I oversaw both the earthquake response in Turkey and Syria and the Pakistan catastrophic flood responses in 2023, I believe. And in both cases, we had very strained relations with those governments. And our response to those earthquakes opened up mill and diplomatic channels that were really closing, if not closed, before those responses. So it has very concrete impacts on our national security in addition to our humanity.
On our national security, our safety and security here.
Right.
And I think that's the piece that
It's missing.
is missing.
Well, I hope we've convinced everyone that there is this
Everyone here,
incredible,
anyway.
yeah, relationship between our security, as Senator Shaheen just pointed out, our trade relationships, but also our agriculture production here at home. And not only because of the obvious fear of disease and what can happen and the lack of seizing the moment, which we've always done from Norman Borlaug on in the ag community with research, that we will fall behind, but also the immediate with purchasing American agriculture products while they're already suffering under the weight of these tariffs and the limits on domestic food purchases with food assistance and animal disease and the like. So that was our focus in 1 hour. And I think we've accomplished it, but I look forward to working with Senator Sheen, Senator Kane, and many others as we go forward on this.
Yes, thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Thank you again so much to each of our panelists and to the senators who attended and to all of you for being here. Please go out, spread the word. You know, my current motto is call everyone. Everyone you know. Get on your social media. Talk to everybody about what the impact is. Thank you all so much.